Right, 1903. Any further check-ins? ZS6 IPS standing by. Okay, 1904. Second last call for check-ins. ZS6 Papa Sierra still standing by. Hey, Pierre, let's just do an audio check on Zoom quickly.
Hi, Chad. Yeah, your audio is 5.9.
Can't be. We're on Zoom, China. Okay, last call for check-ins. ZS6 IPS still standing by. Come, there's a lot of people listening. Guys, check in. It does help. ZS6 IPS. Is Christelle with you? I want to put her on the list if she is.
Yeah, she's listening, but she's busy writing some stuff, some documentation. So she will not participate.
Okay, 1905. Good evening, everybody. Today is Sunday, the 29th of January, 2023. It's now 1905, so let's begin with the weekly net. We usually begin with the amateur radio check-ins from 1900 on the Ruhrpoort repeater for 5 minutes before proceeding. This net is broadcast every Sunday evening starting at 1900 and is broadcast for the benefit of radio amateurs, disaster relief cert volunteers, and members of the general public and other interested parties or organizations. Everyone is welcome to participate using either the amateur radio bands or Zoom, or both if you desire. I'd like to remind all amateur radio listeners who have not checked in that you do not need to be a member of any group or club to check in or to use the repeater or any other amateur radio bands. All that is required from you is that you have a valid amateur radio license issued by ICASA, which automatically grants you the right to use any of the amateur radio bands at any time. There is no need to ask for or be granted permission from anyone else in order to use the repeaters or amateur radio bands. I would also like to encourage all the listeners and participants to share the weekly Zoom link with everyone they know throughout South Africa, as doing so will help us grow the weekly net and will contribute to disseminating information as far and wide as possible. Okay, ZS6 IPS returning. Time to unpack the weekly COVID-19 figures. Globally, the reported COVID-19 figures are at 670,225,980. Now, that compared to last week's figure of 668,744,368. ZS6 IPS returning. That is an increase of 1.4 million cases being reported in the last week, which is down slightly, quite considerably from the previous week's figure of 1.9 million. So there is quite a substantial drop of almost 500,000 in the new cases average over the previous week. The death toll globally is now at 6,820,260 compared to the last week's total of 6.7 million. That's an increase of 84,000 people that have lost their life in this last week. compared to the previous week's increase of 16,000. And I think this was because of the fact that as we came out of the holiday season worldwide, testing has been ramped up, and of course now there are higher numbers. And of course, as a result of the festivities, I think a lot of people contracted COVID, etc., as they got together over the Christmas period. ZS6OPS returning. Now, South Africa's COVID-19 figures have seen a decrease in new cases for the week ending 25 January, which is the third week of the year. Our figures at the moment, it's an increase. This week, we have a total of 1,506 compared to 1,200 of the previous week. So we are in actual fact up there by about 210 new cases above the weekly average. The death toll, however, this week was only standing at 7 compared to the previous week of 20. So week on week, that's a decrease of 13. Mpox, on the other hand, and for those of you that might be tuning in for the first time, monkeypox has now been officially renamed worldwide. It's now termed Mpox, to be more politically correct, I should imagine. However, the cases are standing at 85,382 as at the 27th of January, compared to the 84,000 of the previous week. Again, that's an increase of 466 cases in this last week. South Africa's Mpox cases still stands at 5, with no further cases having been reported, literally in the last, I think, 4 months, to be quite honest. Now, moving on to measles. There is currently an outbreak of measles, and as I said in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I will be including it in the weekly figures in the interest of public health. So, as at the 19th of February, South Africa has 394 compared to the previous week's total of 318. So there were 14 new cases reported in the last week. With Limpopo still leading the pack at 143 cases, followed by the Northwest with 120. Gauteng, fortunately, is only sitting at 23. ZS6OPS returning. With regards to World Health News, there's no real news or no news to report at this stage. However, there are reports this week in South Africa that there is an outbreak of swine flu in the country. And my comments on it is quite simply, on top of everything else, we make statements that food security is not under threat. So that is something to consider. However, the last 24 hours in particular, water has become, or the lack thereof, of water has become quite acute and severe, as we are seeing many areas without water at present. The following was posted today for the West Rand area alone. The power failure at Randwater's Eikenhof pumping station affected water pumping. Just to give you a little bit of background into that. 2 of the transformers in and around the Randwater pumping station decided to blow up. They've managed to repair one. Randwater is currently only producing 60% output on their water. So to go on, the power supply has been restored on one transformer, with City Power still fault finding on the other transformer. Randwater Eikenhof booster station is pumping at 60% of its capacity until City Power fully restores power supply. The power failure has resulted in reduced levels at various Randwater reservoirs, including Waterval 1 and 2, Roodepoort, Krugersdorp number 4. There you go, Adrian, you're also included. Weltevreden, Meerdal, Willie, that's you. Witpootjie 1 and 2. And the following system at Joburg Water are impacted. ZS6OPS returning. First one is the Commando system. That's Crosby, Brixton, and Hurst Hill. Randwater direct feeds Cornelia Street, Weltevreden high pressure, Weltevreden high pressure bypass. Number 3 is Honeydew Tower. Number 4 is the Linden Tower. Number 5 is Rivoli Extension. Number 6 is the Florida Tower. Number 7 is the Constantia Tower. 8 is the Helderkruin Reservoir and Tower. And 9 is the Witbooi Reservoir and Tower. The latest update that has come through with regards to the Witbooi Helderkruin sort of area, the water tower levels have dropped even further since 2 o'clock this afternoon. So when you start looking at all of these towers just on the West Rand alone, or in particular, you can see virtually the entire Western, and I shouldn't say West Rand. West Rand is a municipality of its own accord. This is the western side of Johannesburg. The West Rand is on the other side of Magall City, and they fall under the West Rand municipality. So the western side of Johannesburg, to be more accurate, is in actual fact virtually without water. Our water pressures are extremely low on the higher levels. What's concerning is where one would have expected the lower levels to have water, they actually don't have water. And the reason for this is that as the water has been, it does work on gravity feed, but water still has to drop to be pumped back up into the other low-lying areas. And with the load shedding and everything else that is happening, those pumps are not activated. ZS6 OPS returning. Now, as stated, this is the western side of Johannesburg. The southern side of Johannesburg has also been severely affected, not to mention that due to burst water pipes, pressure valves, etc., that are all being stolen, broken, destroyed, vandalized. Other areas that are without electricity, and this has been going on for several days. Let me just open up Zoom if I can find my mouse here quickly before I go on. Switching between screens does become a problem sometimes. There we go. Okay, so this lack of water, unfortunately, is a serious concern or cause for concern, as the effect of the lack of water leads to all kinds of hygiene-related diseases. And we as communities need to ensure that we are in a position to combat any outbreaks that may in actual fact follow. ZS6 OPS returning. Now, to quote from the World Health Organization's fact sheet, contaminated water and poor sanitation. Now, I understand that we are actually discussing, or at least I am raising the point of lack of water. You must remember that when there is a lack of water, many communities will seek water through unsavory means. They may even start using water out of local rivers, out of local dams, out of wherever. That water could in actual fact fall into the contaminated water category. And then, of course, because there is no running water, no water being pumped, of course, the sewage system is unable to operate correctly. The danger of no water running through the sewage system, well, it's quite simple. It's very much like flushing the toilet. If you don't have water coming in at a certain point, then whatever gets added to that particular route and path and pipe definitely is not going to move anywhere. It's going to cake up, it's going to build up, and eventually you're going to get a backlog. And when water does come, you'll suddenly find that certain toilets are going to turn brown and all the rest of the other good stuff because of the backflow of water. So, contaminated water, to continue the quote from the World Health Organization fact sheet, contaminated water and poor sanitation are linked to transmission of diseases such as cholera, diarrhea, dysentery, hepatitis A, typhoid, and polio. ZS6 OPS returning. Absent, inadequate, or inappropriately managed water and sanitation services expose individuals to preventable health risks. In other words, without this water, we in actual fact open up communities to various health risks, as previously mentioned. And, you know, for the listeners out there, is this meant to in actual fact, shock and awe and all the rest of it, yes, it is. We got to start taking things very, very seriously in this country. ESCOM has announced that we will start on a stage 2 and stage 3 permanent load shedding basis over the next couple of months. They said up to 2 years. Therefore, we are going to experience these issues as we move forward. And of course, if the load shedding levels are increased, it's just going to get worse. We are going to find ourselves in situations where, even though there might be load shedding at stage 2 and 3, you must remember that to refill and pump water into the reservoirs and the towers takes a fair bit of time, and it's not something that is actually sorted out quite quickly. You know, once there is enough water in the tower and there's sufficient gravity and all the rest of it, the entire system still needs to be bled in order for everybody to start getting water in an appropriate manner. So this lack of water, besides the lack of electricity, is something that every single person, whether you're a radio amateur or not, and guys, I want to make it quite clear that Chad, in his personal capacity, when he does these broadcasts, does so in the interest of public health. Whether you're a radio amateur or not is irrelevant, because there's a lot of family members that could be listening to, and in all honesty, should be listening to broadcasts and bulletins and news briefings such as this that I hold in terms of disaster relief and related activities. Just remember as well that Disaster Relief CERT is not a radio amateur organization. We are only using amateur radio as a tool. And for those of you that think that it's inappropriate, please read the regulations. Now, moving on. Therefore, always keep water on hand for washing, let alone drinking. Guys, use your toilet, your pool water for toilet flushing. Don't use it if it looks like mine, black and brown, for washing your dishes and that. Maybe it's time to go back to the good old-fashioned fish and chips. Okay, ZS6 OPS returning. Maybe it's time to go back to the good old-fashioned fish and chip eating method, where everything was served on a newspaper. That way you don't need to worry about washing up your plates, etc., etc., etc. But it has become critical that every single community starts looking out and starts preserving the water that we have got. In addition to that, when you do have running water, at least store 12 liters of water per day per person, and keep at least 3 days worth of water that is handy, readily available, specifically for drinking purposes. We are currently experiencing a heat wave, and this alone is also now just adding fuel to the fire. And of course, you can start seeing the effects of heat stroke and all the other heat-related activities, children becoming lethargic, etc., etc. One has to be very careful what we're doing with regards to our water. The use of JoJo tanks, if you got, definitely as a recommended way of storing some water. Now, I know that we're almost at the end of our rainy season, but if you do acquire any JoJos now, your gutter runoff, you could in actual fact still get some water and keep that readily available. And I say this because of the fact that, you know what, I'm going to make a statement. In 2015, 2014, 2010, right back to 1980, when I've sat and I've had discussions and had awareness campaigns such as I'm holding now at this moment in time, everybody has sat back, or a fair number of people have sat back and said, you're crazy. Well, maybe I'm not. It's happening now. It's right here today. We are experiencing the lack of electricity, something that none of the elder generation ever foresaw coming. Yet we've always warned from my old Red Cross days, be careful that electricity doesn't fail. This now has brought us to a point of the lack of water. And for those of you with Netflix, I think it is called Water Wars, go and watch that documentary. It's quite an opener on Netflix. So, guys, please, you need to take this seriously. from a drinking of water perspective with this heat wave, it is hot. So drink plenty of water and, of course, stay alive. Right, ZS6OPS returning after clearing out the timeout timer. Now, for the benefit of radio amateurs and following the SOL report regarding the license renewals, for those of you that didn't catch it during the course of today or did not get the email bulletin, the new amateur license fees are as follows. A 1-year license is now at 177, a 2-year at 338, a 3-year at 485, a 4-year at 618, and a 5-year license at 738. That's approximately 7% increase on the previous year. And as was mentioned by me a week before last, when ICASA accidentally sent out the license renewals, they did do a system restore. They turned off all the renewal options and everything else. So the database has been restored and put back to where it was. So there was no need for alarm or concern or even hours of discussion which took place. I'd also like to remind radio amateurs that you can take full control of your own ICASA license management. ZS6OPS returning. And you do not need to rely on any other party or person to manage your license process for you. To do this, every licensee can create an online account using the online.icasa.org.za by entering a username and password. You will then have to just go through a bit of a process to confirm it and eventually create a legal entity, which you do so using your own personal particulars and your ID number. Your own ID number is critical to the process. Then once ICASA has approved the process, all licenses associated with your ID will be available to you on the portal and for you to be able to manage of your own accord. And therefore, any other person, entity, body, or otherwise that may have your license under their name will in actual fact no longer be there. You've got full and absolute and total control of your very own licenses. Right, so now in closing, I'd like to encourage everyone that is listening, whether you're a radio amateur or not, whether you are a radio amateur's auntie, uncle, aunt, niece, cousin, or even a child over the age of 16, to please register as a disaster relief cert volunteer and to prepare and train to assist local communities for when disasters strike. And please don't say it doesn't happen, it does happen. That is one bit of news that I almost did forget to include in the teleprompter script for this evening. The city of Johannesburg, or at least to be more accurate, the Gauteng provincial government has declared the city of Joburg a disaster relief area following the floods of the 9th of December 2022. So just to clarify the statement or the thought process that disasters never strike, I want you guys to really sit back and stop and think for a minute that between the initial outbreak of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, and today, this country has, I think, had 4 or 5 states of disaster declared in various provinces. So COVID was one of them. There's been one down in the Western Cape, KZN, and of course Gauteng, and I think KZN was actually struck twice. So it was declared a disaster area on 2 different accounts. So again, like I say, come and prepare, train and assist local communities for when disasters strike. Okay, ZS6OPS returning. Let's listen and see if there are any other amateur radio listeners who have not yet checked in. Please go ahead, give me your call sign now. ZS6OPS, I will add you to the bottom of my list. All right, so nobody else wants to be added there as per the norm. Those 100 of you that are still listening out in the background, I really trust and hope that the information that is imparted here is shared amongst others. And I'd like to thank all of those that have checked in this week, as well as those who have joined via Zoom. And of course, I need to acknowledge Christelle is on Zoom. George Z6GRG is there, and Nicola Rez is also there, along with Pia and Adrian, also up on Zoom this evening. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And as the COVID-19 pandemic is still ongoing and is still infecting millions weekly at least, please remember to physically distance yourself and to wear a mask in order to protect others, especially the elderly who could lose their lives if infected with COVID-19. Remember that the mask wearing in these situations is not mandated, it's not mandatory, it's purely voluntary, and it's not to protect you, it's to protect others. Remember, it is also best to also sanitize and wash your hands on a regular basis, and of course for the week moving forward. Be safe, be prepared, and of course be happy. This is ZS6 OPS now releasing 145.625 for general use. I'm switching over to Zoom for discussion with the guys up on Zoom. Cheers all. All right, good stuff, Willie. Yeah, that's in what, about 12, 13 hours then. Well, actually, it's not. That's this week. The week starts on a Sunday. Have a good one. ZS6 OPS definitely out. Zoom guys, you can
What? So chat.
Yeah, bro. All right, so let's see. Nicola, good evening. How are you? Mr. Nick, you need to unmute.
Good evening, gents. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm trying to. This is all new to me.
What do you mean?
Good evening.
What do you mean it's new to you? With such an ugly mask, it should be all that. Oh wait, that's
Zoom thing.
Yeah, zoom. It's just zoom in. Eh? That is not a hat. That's a mask. Holy mackerel! How's it, China?
Good in you, guys.
Okay, let me just